What do Shakespeare, Dante, and Alexander Pope have in common? They have all mastered distinct poetic forms that have shaped English literature. If you read their works out loud or their poems out loud, you will realize that they follow a certain rhythm, a certain beat that hypnotizes its readers from the very first line. Whether it's the unstressed, stressed pattern of the blank verse, or it's the rhyming couplets of the heroic poetry, or it's the intricately interlocked lines of Terza Rima. All of these are crucial to understand for your UGC NET English exam. And trust me, these terms appear in the exam more often than you think. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is all about poetic forms based on metrical patterns and structures. Poets generally employ these poetic forms because they want to create a certain effect amongst the readers. And not just that, but they also want to add value, they want to add meaning to whatever they have written. It takes me back to the concepts provided by the new critiques and the formalists regarding the importance of form over content. But before we understand these poetic forms, let us first understand what a meter is. When you listen to a song, you might get hooked to the song because of its rhythm, because of its beat, right? Similarly, every poem has a rhythm to it, and that rhythmical structure is called as meter. Now you might think that how is a rhythm created in a poem? In a song, there are beats. Similarly, in a poem, there are also beats, and these beats are called as syllables. A syllable is a word or that part of a word that has one vowel sound. Not a vowel, but a vowel sound. For example, let's take the word remember. How many syllables are there? There are 3 syllables. How? Divide the word into parts, like remember. So if you look at each part of the word, you will realize that there is one vowel sound in each word. And that's how you're going to find out the number of syllables. Once you understand how to count the number of syllables in a line, let's go back to our discussion of rhythm in poetry. Now, rhythm in poetry is created because of certain patterns in poetry. What is this pattern? To understand this, let's go back to the first word that we took as an example, which was remember. Now, how are you going to pronounce this word? You're going to pronounce it as remember, right? Look carefully. You're going to put more emphasis on the second syllable, remember, right? So the syllable on which extra stress, extra emphasis is put, that syllable is called as a stressed syllable, and the remaining syllables are called as unstressed syllables. So it is this pattern, this combination of stressed and unstressed syllables that help create a rhythm in poetry. So there are different combinations and different patterns of stressed, unstressed syllables. If it is a combination of 2 syllables, then the first combination can be unstressed syllable and then a stressed syllable, which will create a pattern called as an iamb in poetry. The second pattern is first of a stressed syllable and then of an unstressed syllable, which is called as a trochee. Now, let's move on and discuss the pattern or the combination of 3 syllables. So the first pattern can be unstressed, unstressed and stressed syllable, which is called as anapest, and the second pattern can be stressed, unstressed, unstressed syllable, which is called as dactyl. If it sounds confusing to you right now, then don't worry, I will create another video on prosody explaining all of these things in detail with the help of examples. Having said that, understand just one last thing before we move on to the poetic forms, and that is that each combination of 2 syllables or a combination of 3 syllables, they will create one unit, right? And each unit is called as a foot. So a food can be a group of 2 syllables or it can be a group of 3 syllables. If it is a group of 2 syllables, then it could be an iamb or a chalky based upon the pattern of stressed or unstressed syllables. If it is a group of 3 syllables, then it could be an anapest or a dactyl based upon the combination of stressed and unstressed syllables. So if I say that there are 2 feet in a line of a poem and each foot contains 2 syllables, then how many total syllables will be there in that line of a poem? 4 syllables, right? Now that line is called as a dimeter line because there are 2 feet. Similarly, if there are 3 feet, it will be called as a trimeter line, 4 feet, then a tetrameter line, 5 feet, then pentameter line, 6 feet, then hexameter line, and so on and so forth. Iambic pentameter is one of the most commonly used forms of meter in English poetry. Shakespeare, Chaucer, Milton, all of these poets have used this meter extensively. But the best part is that all 3 of them, they have used in different variations. They have used in different poetic forms. And these are the poetic forms that we are going to discuss now in the video. One of the most common and the most important metrical forms in poetry that you need to understand for your UGC NET English exam is blank verse, which is also called as heroic verse. In blank verse, each line will have 10 syllables and the metrical pattern of these lines will be of unstressed and then stressed syllables. Now you tell me that if any line in poetry has 10 syllables and has an unstressed after which a stressed syllabic pattern, then which meter are we really talking about over here? It is iambic pentameter. The blank verse has unrhymed iambic pentameter lines. Poets usually employ the blank verse form because they wanted to imitate everyday speech. They wanted to imitate the way we speak because generally on a daily basis we don't rhyme and speak, right? And they wanted to capture that. One of the best ways to understand the blank verse form is through understanding W.B. Yeats' The Second Coming. Now, if you can just look at this particular line, which is turning and turning in the widening gyre. If you read this line very slowly, it will sound like turning and turning in the widening gyre. You see the musical quality, the poetic effect that is added to it. And that's what blank verse really does to your ears. Especially as readers, you're hooked to the lines. At the same time, it adds meaning, it adds more value, it adds that effect to whatever W.B. Yeats has written. Apart from W.B. Yeats' The Second Coming, there are a lot of other writers who have employed blank verse form, like John Milton's Paradise Lost. The entire work is written in blank verse. You also have Wallace Stevens's The Sunday Morning. You have Robert Browning's dramatic monologues like The Last Touches, and so many more poems. The second most fascinating poetic form was Ottava Rima. Ottava Rima was originally used in Italian literature. It became a standard for Italian epic poetry because it was used by Giovanni Boccaccio in works like Tacite and Il Filostrato even. In terms of its structure, Ottava Rima is quite simple to understand. The entire poem will be divided into 8 lines where each line will have 11 syllables and the rhyme scheme will be AB, 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 C, C. Now, initially, as I've mentioned before, it was only applied to Italian literature. Later, it was introduced to English literature by Sir Thomas Wyatt and then modified by Lord Byron, one of the greatest romantic poets. So what modification did he bring over here? As I've mentioned before, this line had 11 syllables as used in Italian literature. Now, Lord Byron modified them and just kept 10 syllables. And guess what? Where must have he used Ottava Rima? He used it in his masterpiece, which is Don Juan, and his other work, which is The Vision of Judgment. Apart from Lord Byron, you also see W.B. Yeats using Ottava Rima in works like Among School Children and sailing to Byzantium. The third most important poetic form that was recently asked in UGC NET English exam was Terza Rima. Now, Terza Rima has a bit complicated structure. First of all, understand this, that the entire poem is divided into tercets. Tercets are basically stanzas of 3 lines. So the entire poem is divided into stanzas of 3 lines, and these stanzas have a very interlocking rhyme scheme with each other. So the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, B, C, D, C, and so on and so forth. Terza Rima was invented by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri. Can you make a guess that for which work he must have used this particular form? It was his masterpiece, his magnum opus. It is Divine Comedy. And later, when it was adapted into English literature, our favorite English poets introduced Iambic Pentameter as well into the structure. So even P.B. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind is written in Terza Rima. Now, apart from P.B. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, he also employed Terza Rima for his another work, which is The Triumph of Life. One of the major reasons that the poets used this kind of form was to inculcate that element of anticipation, that element of expectation, right? Because if you read these lines, as readers, we expect something to happen. We expect the narrative to move forward. And that's the effect that they wanted to instill. If blank verse is generally applied to sonnets, lyrical and more philosophical poems, then heroic couplets are generally applied to English epic and narrative poetry. Heroic couplets are also one of the most commonly found verse forms in English literature. The structure of the heroic couplets is also quite simple. The entire poem is divided into two lines, and these 2 lines, they rhyme with each other, and the metrical pattern that the entire poem follows is Iambic Pentameter. The earliest example of heroic couplet can be traced to Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. In fact, the very first line has become an iconic couplet on its own, which is, when that April with his showers suit, the drought of March hath pierced to the root. Then later on, you find John Dryden and Alexander Pope perfecting the heroic couplets in the Restoration and 18th century respectively, making it more self-contained and very closed. And finally, the last and the most important verse form that we are going to discuss in this video is Villanelle. What is a Villanelle? A Villanelle is a 19-line fixed form of verse. How are these 19 lines structured? Let's break it down. The first structure is that this entire poem will be divided into 5 tercets. We discussed what tercets are. Basically stanzas of 3 lines. So there will be 5 stanzas of 3 lines, and towards the end there will be 1 quatrain. And in this entire 19-line poem, there will always be 2 repeating rhymes and 2 refrains. What is a refrain? A refrain is any repeated word or a phrase or a group of words in that particular poem. Villanelles were inspired from the oral tradition, from the folk songs and the peasant songs. And then they were revived in the 20th century by modernists like W.H. Auden and William Empson. The best example that I can give you of a villanelle right now is Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. You also have Sylvia Plath's Mad Girl's Love Song. According to critics, poets generally use villanelle to create a sense of obsession, to create a sense of emotional intensity in their works. And not just that, but the kind of work that they have written, they also want to add schizophrenia-like effects. That is why they use villanelle. These are some of the most commonly asked and the most important poetic forms in English literature. If you want to know more about these forms in detail, understand prosody, and not just that, understand who writers practiced them in what works in detail for your UGC NET English exam preparation, then you can join my live classes for this exam. In these live classes, I'm covering the history of British literature, Indian English literature, and literary theories in a very detailed and comprehensive manner. In the history of British literature and Indian English literature, I am covering each and every literary period in a very detailed and simplified manner. And not just that, I'm also covering each and every author and a detailed discussion of their works, which will help you in tackling the chronology-based questions. And not just that, but I'm also covering the literary theories starting from structuralism down to eco-criticism in a simplified manner. I am breaking down all the complex concepts associated with these literary theories in easy to understand manner as well. This will help you in developing the confidence to ace UGC NET English exam. The best part about these sessions, they are live one-on-one sessions, which means that I can provide you personalized guidance tailored to your needs, requirements, and schedule, trying to fill the possible gaps in your UGC NET English exam preparation. If you want to know more about the kind of courses I offer, the sessions I take, and the notes I provide, feel free to check out my TopMate page at topmate.io/Riya Gandhi. I've shared the link in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. That's it for today's video, folks. If you found this video on prosody and poetic forms informative and helpful, please like it and share it with other UGC NET English aspirants as well. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any videos that I will be uploading related to UGC NET English exam in the future. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one.